this entire sector, we look at it as a natural capital asset, of which carbon credit is one component. And more importantly, carbon becomes the central piece because that is where the market is right now, right?
Yeah.
That's a sector which is evolving fast, becoming more organized. There are different building pieces which are coming together. And that's why the prime focus on carbon credit and growing that market to help deliver value to the smallholder farmers and create that behavior change, right? But apart from that, if you look at it, it is leading to saving billions of liters of water in terms of how you are producing food, right? So we talk about like more production per liter, right? That becomes a really important aspect in our business, that you're able to produce more from using lesser inputs.
Correct.
That's one. Second, this is also able to help increase the soil fertility by increasing the soil organic carbon content, right? So it basically lends a lot of support to food security angle.
Yeah.
So as a country, India needs to feed 1.4 billion people, but we also export to a few dozen countries,
Correct.
right? Outside India as well.
Correct.
And so from food security perspective, it becomes a really important one. Then you can see biodiversity. By using these practices, there is critical evidence which are available out there in scientific journals, which showcases increase in microbial health of the soil as well, right? So which means the biodiversity increase is also coming into the picture, while also providing more nourishment to humans in the form of food production.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Orios Founder series. Today I'm super excited to be speaking with Madhur, the founder of Varaha. Varaha is a full stack climate tech product aimed at offsetting greenhouse gas emissions by developing nature-based carbon offset projects, also incentivizing thousands of smallhold farmers along the way. Orios invested in Varaha back in mid-2022. It's been almost 1.5 years, and in 1.5 years, Varaha has scaled to 700,000 acres of land under enrollment, with 100 plus farmer partners with the organization. Madhur, why don't you start with telling us about your journey? Also tell us about Varaha's journey. And there are major stakeholders, 3 major stakeholders that I understand. One is the farmer, smallhold farmer. Second are the farmer partners. And third are the buyers, the net emitters, who need carbon credits for offset. How do you manage all of these 3, or how do they benefit from your platform?
So in terms of my personal journey, I happen to be an agricultural engineer by background, but then an MBA which also focused hugely upon agribusiness management. And then I've spent close to 12 years being an early stage operator, working with venture capitalists, working with some of the largest agri conglomerates in India, such as Godrej Agrovet, and then also on the early stage startup side, how to create enterprises within agriculture at the intersection of impact and tech, building teams, first principles thinking, building product, and serving smallholder farmers, and scaling those products to not just farmers in India, but also to some of the other sub-Saharan African nations such as Kenya. So I think just with this diverse background of having worked in agriculture, and also my co-founders and founding team, which comes with a lot of diverse experience of building products for smallholder farmers, I think that sort of paved the way for creation of Varaha. So what we essentially do at Varaha is agriculture contributes to 24% of the total global emissions. And so there are specific evidence and scientific studies which proves that agriculture can actually sequester carbon and remove carbon from the atmosphere, and it can be a part of the solution rather than being the problem itself when it comes to climate change. So we focus upon helping farmers reduce these emissions through their practices, increase soil fertility by sequestering more carbon in the soil through different kind of interventions, and then we use science and tech platform that we have built to validate these interventions and quantify the net carbon reduction and sequestration which takes place as an impact of it.
Wonderful. Talking about regenerative agriculture, which is the core product for Varaha, apart from carbon credit generation and carbon sequestration, what other benefits or advantages does it have?
Yeah, I think that's a really important one, Vaibhav, and thanks for asking that. So see, how Varaha views this entire sector, we look at it as a natural capital asset, of which carbon credit is one component. And more importantly, carbon becomes the central piece because that is where the market is right now, right? That's a sector which is evolving fast, becoming more organized. There are different building pieces which are coming together. And that's why the prime focus on carbon credit and growing that market to help deliver value to the smallholder farmers and create that behavior change, right? But apart from that, if you look at it, it is leading to saving billions of liters of water in terms of how you are producing food, right? So we talk about like more production per liter, right? That becomes a really important aspect in our business, that you're able to produce more from using lesser inputs.
Correct.
That's one. Second, this is also able to help increase the soil fertility by increasing the soil organic carbon content, right? So it basically lends a lot of support to food security angle.
Yeah.
So as a country, India needs to feed 1.4 billion people, but we also export to a few dozen countries,
Correct.
right? Outside India as well.
Correct.
And so from food security perspective, it becomes a really important one. Then you can see biodiversity. By using these practices, there is critical evidence which are available out there in scientific journals, which showcases increase in microbial health of the soil as well, right? So which means the biodiversity increase is also coming into the picture, while also providing more nourishment to humans in the form of food production, right? So if you bundle all of these benefits together, water saving, food security, biodiversity in the form of microbial growth increase, right, while reducing pollution, nutrition, I think the amount of ecological and the human benefits that it provides is humongous. And that's why we believe that this category will grow and needs to grow at a significant pace, right? Because of all the benefits which are involved, which are much beyond carbon.
Wonderful. You mentioned you are present across multiple geographies, 700,000 acres of land. What all geographies are you present in currently?
So, Vaibhav, we started off with India, primarily looking at the Indo-Gangetic Plains, which flows right from Punjab, Haryana, then goes all the way to UP, Bihar, and West Bengal. So these were the prime states that we started off with to build our hypothesis, test our product in different crops, different conditions. But then once the product started to take shape, we saw that if we have good implementation partners on the ground in different regions, we can also go multi-country.
Yeah.
And so it very quickly evolved into a more global platform. So we are already in India, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Kenya at this point in time.
Understood. Given that this is such a new model, back in 2021, 2022, when you guys started, the market wasn't aware of terms like nature-based voluntary carbon credit or sort of carbon offsetting. How do you calculate the total net emission of an organization? What challenges did you face during your early fundraising journey?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question actually. So, carbon credits have existed for a long period of time now. I mean, close to 27, 28 years now as a concept, right? But it has been majorly focused upon reduction-based credits, which is your renewable energy, wind, biodigesters, and so on and so forth. But I think as more and more evidence has started to come through that if we have to heal nature and the environment as a whole, we just can't focus on carbon emissions. It has to be a much more foolproof restoration in terms of biodiversity, other key natural inputs such as water, etc. And so nature has started to emerge as the much more scientific solution to sort of reducing and sequestering carbon, rather than just focusing upon reduction technologies such as renewable energy, right? And so definitely when we started in early 2022, the market was in its much earlier stage, and it took a lot of education. So when we went to the market to raise capital and educate, we saw that most of the folks were not even aware that you can create carbon credits from nature-based solutions such as agriculture. And so I think that is the part of category creation in my view in a lot of ways, that you have to work with people, you have to educate what it is about, showcase evidence, science, data, facts around it. And I think this eventually led to a successful round in the form of seed led by Orios, and then eventually the recently concluded Series A based on much more fundamental hypothesis building on top of it.
On that note, congratulations on your latest Series A raise. You have raised a significant amount of capital. Tell us how Varaha plans to utilize this capital that you have raised. How do you want to scale with this capital?
Yeah, so wherever we raised a $4 million seed back in 2022, that was mainly focused upon how to build the tech data which is required to actually scale carbon markets in nature-based solutions. And once the fruits of having built that platform started to bear fruits, then it was time to how to scale it to multiple geographies. Plus further increase the capabilities of what we can offer as a company towards the nature-based solution and diversify offerings. And that is what led to the recent raise of another 8.7 million in the form of Series A. In terms of specific activities wherein this capital infusion will be used, so a few things primarily are, one is building team on the BD side, business development side, like which geographies to go after in South Asia as well as Sub-Saharan Africa, and which are the more opportune opportunities. So really laying down a plan and strategy for that. The second part is that how do we really reinforce and double down on the capabilities both on science and tech side. So really building the talent pipeline over there and furthering our tech capabilities. And the third area would be that how do we enhance and diversify our offerings. So we started off primarily with regenerative agriculture, but there are several other categories which are fast emerging, moving as a fast market maker. So how do we really have a play and be a more diversified platform for the buyers? I think this is where the capital is going to be used.
Understood. I remember you, when I first met you, primarily started with agri practices for carbon credits. So nature-based agri regen practices for nature credits. And now you have evolved over to mangroves and other nature-based practices. Could you elaborate on what all practices do you have right now for generation of carbon credits? What all do you target?
Sure. So, see, we just given the background, as I mentioned, of the co-founders as well as the founding team, agriculture slotted very well into our skill sets and experiences. But then we saw that the same user that we are working with, they have lands which are getting degraded because they are left fallow.
Correct.
And are not being tended to, right? And these farmers were looking for a sort of a diversification of income, right? So agroforestry based mechanisms or afforestation based mechanisms which can help rejuvenate the degrading lands, plus because these trees also yield fruits and nuts over a period of time, can also increase the livelihoods.
Correct.
An alternate livelihood for the farmer, so to say, and increase their and enhance their income streams. So it looked like a really impactful initiative, which at the same time also fits well into the core of the company, which is creation of nature-based high-quality carbon credits. So we went into the afforestation domain as well, which is plantation of fruit and nut trees. And I think this also helped us because the buyers that we are working with on the regenerative agriculture side, they're looking to build a portfolio of diversified credits. And so ARR also helps us make an unique, attractive destination. And then eventually, organically, we also saw that the farmers that we are working with have residue coming after the harvest cycles from their produce, right? Sometimes this residue is actually being burnt out in the open, creating a nuisance for the atmosphere, human health, etc. So based on that insight, we started to turn that residue into a condensed carbon form called biochar. Right, and biochar comes with 1,000-year permanence minimum, which means it's a permanent source of carbon removal. And so I think just taking a leaf out of how to work with a user and an asset and create multiple products out of it. And so that is the journey that we took of creating a diversified product stream and revenue stream for ourselves in the form of these three offerings.
How do you ensure the quality and credibility of these projects that you register? How do you sort of make sure that all of these projects are 100%, the carbon credits that are sort of generated from these projects are quality credits which can be traded easily in the market? How do you ensure that?
Yeah, so I think this has probably been the Achilles heel for the carbon markets as a whole, that how do you ensure credibility, traceability, and the answer lies in what has happened to other sectors across the world, right? So if you see any sector, whether it's healthcare, entertainment, it has been disrupted by use of tech, data, infrastructure on the software side. And this is what we do on the carbon side as well, that if carbon credits are created based on a certain intervention that you're doing on the ground, right? How do you really validate whether that intervention is actually taking place?
Correct.
Right? How do you generate data on that, first of all? So how to credibly collect data, and how to put that data onto an infrastructure which is visible to the buyers who are interested in buying those carbon credits. So I think our model hinged upon these two fundamental findings, that if we are able to find a credible source to garner data from the ground, build models on top of those data sets that you're collecting, and then put those models and the outcomes on an infrastructure, software-based infrastructure, which can be validated by buyers, you can command a premium in the market, plus also scale your business much faster. And so this is what we do across our offerings, whether it's regenerative agriculture, agroforestry, and biochar, collecting data through a digital mechanism, building models on top of it, and then whatever the outcomes are coming, putting it on a sort of a software-based infrastructure which can be sort of shown to different folks who are interested in these credits.
Understood. Can you elaborate on the core technology that drives Varaha? Because you mentioned about the software layer, the infrastructure that you have built. What is the core technology that drives operations, or core technology that drives Varaha?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of several things, I would say. So one is, and I think, nothing fancy about it. It's basically being able to use digital tools which we saw missing in the market. Like, people are collecting data on paper-based surveys, right? So just changing that created a huge impact to be able to do that more on a digital platform. The second part is when we build these models. So there's a lot of machine learning which is involved, based on the data sets which are being collected, so that we are able to validate and verify things at massive scale, whether a certain intervention is being taken place on the ground or not, which is eligible for carbon credits. And the third part is around agricultural and biomass modeling. That once the practice are validated, how do you really do the entire modeling of at what rate the biomass is growing year on year for different species? And in case of agriculture, how much carbon is being sequestered because of those change in practices? So running those experiments on the ground and building agricultural models on top of it, or biomass model, to be able to estimate credits in the credible fashion. So these are some of the facets of the tech platform.
Understood. The whole revenue model that you have devised for Varaha, wherein multiple partners are there, wherein the revenue is divided amongst all of them. Could you talk about the revenue model in detail? How do you guys plan to, or how does a smallhold farmer benefit from this model? How does the partner benefit from this model?
So, see, we saw that as a business, we are sort of creating an ecosystem which constitutes of partners on the ground, and these partners come in different shapes and sizes, but essentially someone who has access to farmer feet on street and a willingness to work towards sustainable agricultural and nature-based solutions practices, right? And then the second part to it is the farmer, right? And so the idea was that if we are able to create a business model wherein the incentives are aligned for everyone to do the job well, then the business can scale, and with quality, right, and lead to the right outcomes for everyone. And so this is where we said that since farmers are the main participants in the model, they are the ones who are sort of changing behavior, changing practices in how they conduct their businesses on their land area, they should be the ones who should be rewarded with the highest share of the revenue, right? So the majority of the revenue share, irrespective of the category that we are talking about, goes back to the smallholders. A small share then is also shared with the partners because they are using their feet on street to educate, provide machineries, data collection, etc. And then the rest is kept with Varaha. But what we ensure is that irrespective of the country, irrespective of the geography that we are working in, the majority goes back to the smallholder farmers that we are working with.
Now let's talk about the company progress so far. How many credits has Varaha contracted sale of?
So, Vaibhav, as I mentioned that we have several projects, carbon projects, across different categories, which is agriculture, afforestation and biochar, and that also is diversified across geographies, both in India, South Asia and East Africa as well. And I think the good thing is that we've been able to get significant progress in terms of commercial traction in each of the projects categories. and multiple geographies, right? Which is great, which sort of signifies the basic hypothesis that having a diversified set of credits spread across diversified portfolio of geographies helps attract more attention. And so in total, just to answer your direct question, we have contracted close to 250,000 credits, and with multiple contracts in discussion right now with significant additional traction. And I think one interesting thing that I also wanted to touch upon, that depending upon the project category, you will see a huge fluctuation in the prices as well. And there is a logic to it. So for example, whereas a regenerative agriculture project would sell for somewhere between $25 to $35 each, right? Depending on the stage of the project. Have you issued or your pre-issuance, the price can fluctuate. If you look at a biochar credit, for example, because the permanence of these credits is 1,000 plus years when they are certified, they are selling for anywhere between $125 to $160 for us.
Wonderful.
Right? Which is a huge range, but I think, as I said, there's a method to the madness. So depending upon the co-benefits in terms of biodiversity, water savings, community incomes, and then the permanence of the credits, the prices can fluctuate drastically. But we've been able to find traction across these categories in a very short period of time, which creates enough data points for us to scale all categories while generating value, keeping the smallholder farmers at the core.
Wonderful, wonderful. What is a typical buyer profile like? All the buyers, the partners that you have, what is a typical profile of a buyer?
Yeah, so see, it comes in different shapes and sizes again, different farmers, different partners. I think the buyer persona can also vary drastically. So one persona is of like marketplaces, like specifically those marketplaces who have their own technical carbon teams, science teams, and so marketplaces who are able to attract enough talent to be able to do a due diligence on a project like ours. Correct. Which is usually scientific and data oriented in nature, right? So that's a typical persona that we started off working with, because these people then have access to large set of corporates who are looking to offset their emissions, right? So that's how we started. But then over a period of time, we started to see some direct touch points as well with the end use buyers. So for example, a large financial institution in Europe bought directly from us last year, and those credits are also being created and delivered already, right? So it's not just a contract, but something which has resulted into delivery of credits and realization of actual revenue into the bank account, right? So I think it has been sort of an evolution as well. So our idea is that how do we work with a diversified set of buyers? It could be a marketplace or an end use buyer who is able to provide a price point at which it makes sense for a smallholder farmer that we are working with.
Understood. For people who aspire to be in this space, the climate space, a major deterrent for them is regulatory and compliance guidelines. Now, while I know that there are no hard set guidelines right now in India, how do you, or what do you foresee in the coming future, this compliance and regulation as a deterrent? Will it be there for climate guys? Will it be a market that is much relaxed to do business in? What's your take on the regulatory and compliance space in India and across the globe?
So, see, again, a really interesting question. Something I like to reflect on quite a bit personally as well, just given it affects us also and how the market evolves. See, if you look at the compliance market globally, it's already $850 billion, so massive, right? We are playing in the voluntary carbon market right now, wherein the companies are taking voluntary targets to turn net zero by a certain year. It can be 2030, 35, 40, 45, 50, whatever it is, right? In the next 5 to 27 years, right from now. Now, I think while voluntary market remain unfazed to a very large degree, or remained unfazed by the government regulations to a very large degree in the last few years or decades, I think that's going to change significantly. And governments are going to play a crucial role from 2 or 3 perspectives. One is to create their local markets, get a revenue stream out of it and make them fair. Like if suppose farmers are involved, the government has to sort of ensure that farmers are getting a certain percentage of it, right, which is enough for them. They need to ensure the pricing remains fair for the country so that the revenue realized by the organizations working in that country and the participants which are involved is fair enough, right? So I do think a lot of countries, like for example, India also is working on a local carbon market mechanism, which can sort of spur the sector, given the amount of biomass and the land that we have, which can create carbon credits. So in my view, I see the compliance and voluntary market lines getting phased out or getting blurry a little bit, and which will help expand the sector much more for folks like us who are just focused on voluntary market, right? And with government sort of coming into the picture, it will make market hopefully more fairer, transparent for everyone. So I personally think it's going to be an enabler rather than being a deterrent, to be very honest.
Understood. And along similar lines, to be as an advice from you to all the aspiring climate techie or founders, there is the second aspect is primarily hiring within the space. So getting the right team in place, that too in a climate tech startup across geographies, must have been a major challenge for you. So if you could throw light, tell us or tell the founders how to get the right team in place at the right time, and then scale from X to 10X and from 10X to 100X for a company like Varaha also. What do you have in mind? How do you plan to sort of gather that team that will help you scale quickly?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would humbly admit that we are early stage as well. So rather than advice, I would say just sharing our experience, right? And it still remains a question that we need to answer to ourselves each day as we diversify the profiles more and more. How do we source that kind of talent? So, see, our experience has been that rather than looking for like very specific skill sets, we sort of index more upon drive, first principles thinking, analytics in terms of thought process, and very driven and can work hard, right? I think these are the things that we try and index upon rather than very specific skill sets that they know. So, I mean, basically the hypothesis, if you hire someone smart who can work really hard, can think analytically with numbers, can actually learn and deliver. So I think in the first 6 months of building the organization, we were looking for very specific skill set, but we were also learning as founders along the way. And we realized if we can learn, we can also get just smart people working in diversified sectors who bring different thought processes and then build an organization around it. So I think it's like for any other startup organization, how one should think about talent. Also, we see at this point in time, there is a huge driving force among the young folks across the globe, not just in India. Like hugely talented with great pre-degree, great experience, writing to us every day. Like we receive at least 20-30 applications of very high quality saying that we want to move into climate. We see this more as a mission around which you can build not just your career, but your life around. I think that's very inspiring, right? So I think a lot of talent pipeline is also being driven from these inbounds that we are now receiving as a company.
Thank you so much, Madhur, for this insightful conversation. And stay tuned, guys. We'll be coming up with many more insightful talks in the future.